Welcome back to another episode of the Quillette Cetera podcast. Today I'm with John Aziz. John is a British Palestinian peace activist living in the UK. John's father was born in a rural village in the West Bank. He went on to study astrophysics and got a PhD in America. While John was brought up in the UK, he was very much brought up with a connection to his father's Palestinian and Arab culture. He's a proud Palestinian man, but he also supports Israel and Zionism, which I found very refreshing and very surprising. John writes about this in a piece for The Atlantic published in November. The piece went absolutely viral, and that's how I came across John. I'll link you to the article in the show notes. I really recommend that you read it, and I really hope that you get a lot out of this conversation. I definitely did. Without much further ado, let's get into it. John, how did you come to write this piece?
So I'm a Palestinian British guy. I've been using Twitter, most of the time Twitter's existed at a fairly small and unsuccessful level. And after the October the 7th attack, I was writing some stuff about my feelings about the conflict, about how the Palestinian cause has become dominated by groups like Hamas, and how their strategy of, kind of eternal resistance for kind of maximalist demand of a Palestinian state from the river to the sea, how that seems to have just completely come off the rails and failed. And there's obviously horrible violence taking place in Israel, where people are being killed in over 1,000, including hundreds of civilians. And then of course there's terrible violence in retaliation while Israel is trying to destroy Hamas in this war. So I don't like seeing either of those things. Both of those things are pretty emotionally horrifying. It's anyone with any empathy can feel for the the destruction that we see in both on October the 7th and in Gaza. It's a horrible thing to see. So I was feeling quite passionately frustrated about the situation and about the history of the failed peace negotiations in 2000 and 2008, and Hamas takeover of the Palestinian cause since then. And I was just feeling very frustrated, and I let out some tweets on Twitter and or X or whatever we call it nowadays in Elon Musk's brave new utopia. The Atlantic, for whatever reason, picked up on my views and thought that they would like to publish them.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think it was so successful? Why? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you. Why are people so interested to hear what you have to say?
Yeah, I'm not. That's probably multiple different answers, aren't there? I think when an article's popular and then thousands or millions of people are clicking on it, it's going to be popular for lots of different reasons, individual to each of the people clicking on it. But I think people certainly want to. I'm not representative of the Palestinian cause. I don't claim to speak for the Palestinian people. I think certainly some people wanted to hear a dissident Palestinian voice. I think there is definitely frustration worldwide in Palestine and in Israel at the failure of the peace process over the last, 75 years. I was going to say 20 or 30 years, because that's kind of my lifespan. But I think people want to see a peaceful, reasonable resolution where people on both sides can live relatively normal, peaceful lives. And I think that's something that there are people on both sides that want to see that. So
we do have a plethora of opinion pieces, though, from Palestinians and the pro-Palestinian cause. We've always had those. What do you think makes your perspective so different?
I think to some, I'm from my point of view, I'm approaching this as a kind of a humanist, right? I'm trying to look at things from the perspectives of both Israelis and Palestinians, and trying to wish the best for both of those people. And I think there is a lot of vitriol on both sides. I think Israelis probably do find it hard to look at things from the Palestinian perspective, and Palestinians equally find it hard to look at things from the Israeli perspective. So I think because I'm approaching it from the frame of reference of trying to be empathetic and kind to both groups of people, and that's a controversial thing to say. I can sometimes get pilloried by Palestinians for having too much empathy for the Israelis. I've been accused of being a tokenized voice that Israelis can use to make themselves feel better about themselves. Oh, if only all the Palestinians thought like John Aziz, that there will be peace. And of course, I'm not saying that. Ultimately, peace has to be between the people who exist. There has to be a peace agreement that takes into account the positions of both groups, as there was in Northern Ireland, right? The Republicans and the Unionists, they didn't radically change their position to make peace. They made peace by coming together to make peace and to set up a system where both groups could mutually coexist. So yeah, I certainly don't want to be tokenized either and treated as if I'm somehow separate to the to other Palestinians. I know it would be so much better if John's views were more more normalized on the Palestinian side. I think it will take leaders in Israel and Palestine who have pro-peace views and pro-coexistence views and pro-empathy views. I think that's very important, and that's really who my criticism goes at is really it's towards the leadership on both sides to look at each other more in a empathetic and tolerant way.
Do you think any side? This is a bit of a spicy question, but I'm putting it out there. Do you think that any side has a monopoly on empathy or tolerance or this humanist streak? Do you think it's a cultural thing?
Yeah, I would say that there's no monopoly at all. There's empathetic, humanistic people on both sides. There's no doubt about it. No doubt at the same time there are cultural differences, right, between the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. And I think the power dynamics of the situation probably make it easier for Israelis to be peace activists. As a Palestinian peace activist, I'm far outnumbered by Israeli peace activists. There's more of a culture of dissent and pluralism, perhaps, in Israeli culture as opposed to Palestinian culture. Maybe Palestinian culture has a dimension of sort of conformism to it, where people who are dissenters, I have a friend from Gaza who, he's been arrested over 20 times by Hamas, right? Just for expressing, basic political criticism of Hamas. So yes, there are cultural differences, but ultimately we are the same human beings, right? We're the same emotional animals, right? But both sides, we're the same organisms. We're human beings, and that means that ultimately everything we do is within the humanistic paradigm of all the multiple different things that humans can do.
There has been this sort of rhetoric that Hamas, who obviously isn't the Palestinians in general, but Hamas does play into or takes advantage of the Israelis' desire to live and to not suffer, that Israelis value life more than Hamas or Palestinians.
Yes. So I think you're talking about the Hamas, somewhat of a slogan, which is we love death more than you love life. And I think the history of that originates really in kind of medieval warfare, right? It originates in wanting to train an army that's willing to defeat the enemy. And if you teach your soldiers that you love to love death, to love the prospect of death, that is an effective thing, because of course we saw the militaristic success of various Islamic empires throughout the medieval period, the Middle Ages. That's absolutely something that's been utilized as a military strategy, and I think that's something that Hamas is utilizing as a military strategy today. That they kind of promote this idea that I mean they're using a religious concept here. They're using the idea that you're going to die and you're going to go to heaven, and if you go to heaven, then you're going to get this one wonderful experience with a sexual component to it as well, right? But with virgins and whatnot, apparently. But I think that is it's a military strategy that's been used through the ages. In some ways it's a medieval strategy, isn't it? And I think I think that in terms of achieving peace, I don't think that's that militaristic strategy is a very good idea, because it's so maximalist. It's so, we have to defeat the enemy, we have to conquer them. I think that you need to open up a different framework. You need to look at more peaceful and more humanistic ideas, and that's not to ever excuse. I would never excuse Islamophobia, right? I think Muslims can be just as peaceful and just as humanistic as anyone else. But I think in terms of the overall worldview of Palestine, the Palestinian cause, I think we need to we need to focus on being constructive and building, and being without bringing the American definition of this into context, being pro-life. I think both Israelis and Palestinians should be pro-life. Not, I mean, that's nothing to do with abortion.
Okay, and do you think, as it stands, that both sides are equally pro-life?
I mean, Hamas certainly aren't. I mean, Hamas's war is, it's the justification for the war is that they're going to control and dominate and defeat Israel, right? That's why, if you listen to the speeches of Ismail Haniyeh, that would be something that he would raise, is that and he says the civilian deaths are going to strengthen their resistance. I mean, literally, Haniyeh will say the civilian deaths are going to strengthen the resistance, right? Because it strengthens their resolve. So that's not a pro-life statement at all. That's a pro-death statement. And I would say that in terms of developing a peaceful, constructive Palestinian peace movement, I don't think that the ideas of Hamas are compatible with that.
Mm-hmm. And we have seen, I mean, it's been very eye-opening to me, who had no connection to the Middle East at all. Some of my friends who are Egyptian told me that they knew about Memory TV and the things they'd seen on there. But, it's come out that some Palestinian kids have been, essentially groomed through cartoons and other.
About Far For the Mouse.
Far For the Mouse, the jihadi mouse. We've seen some images or videos of kindergartens that have sort of been run by Hamas, and they're teaching kids to, kill Jews. And how do we come back from that? Because those kids are so young and they've already been so groomed.
I mean,
want to die for the cause.
You have to change the narrative. You have to change the narrative, right? You have to have a different a different education system. After the war, we need to look at rebuilding Palestinian society. That includes infrastructure, that includes roads, that includes schools, that includes hospitals. It also includes wanting to promote the idea of living constructively with the neighbors of Palestine, which would include Egypt, and it would include Israel, and it would include Jordan. So you can't build a society on a desire for martyrdom and death. But I'm also gonna criticize Israel, right? I would say that the huge number of civilian deaths, that's not pro-life either. There's been a huge number of Palestinian civilian deaths. I think that there's quotes from Israeli leaders saying that the focus is on damage and not precision. So I think there's need for the Israeli side to take a more humanistic approach. I think they're probably there could have been a plan to evacuate civilians from Gaza. I know that sounds very controversial, and a lot of people are like, "Well, that's going to mean ethnic cleansing." Well, one idea that I've been hearing that is kind of a pragmatic compromise is, why don't they build refugee camps in the Negev desert in Israel? So the civilian population, they can go out of Gaza. Israel can make sure people are not carrying weapons. They can go to the refugee camps in the Negev desert safely and without weapons, and without being, without weapons, so without the capacity to attack Israelis, right? And they could remain there until the war's over. That would be one suggestion. And of course there are lots and lots and lots of other suggestions. There's a lot of hunger and starvation in Gaza. There needs to be more aid. We need to look at things like dropping food from airplanes. Could
I just stop you for a second with the first idea with putting refugees in the Negev desert? If I was living on that border, which was the border that was first attacked, and when that border was penetrated, I believe on October 7th, sell that to me as an Israeli. Why should I help people?
I'll sell it to you. I don't believe there will be an ICJ case against Israel if there had been a proper evacuation of civilians from the Negev. Sorry, from Gaza into the Negev, right? That's one plausible advantage. It would have caused a lot less international heat, probably a lot less criticism from people in Britain and America. I think that's and even if that one particular idea gets thrown aside, there's lots and lots more things that can be done to reduce the suffering of Palestinian civilians. And I think that is Israel is a relative superpower in this, right? So they have a lot more capacity for action and agency than a Palestinian does.
Okay, so you believe that Israel should be held to a higher standard for that reason?
No, not necessarily. I think standards have to be held the same, right? I think we should judge things on the same standard. Absolutely, right? Yeah, and in fact, there's a dangerous kind of anti-Semitic precedent of holding Israel to a different standard to other countries, right? But in terms of capacity for action and capacity for changing things, I think Israel's a modern country, effectively a military superpower. Effectively, I believe Israel is the 14th highest country by GDP per capita in the world. It's ahead of the UK. It's ahead of a lot of European countries. It's a successful.
I'm not sure about that one, actually.
Look it up. It's number 14 in the world. We're looking at GDP per capita.
Okay. Let's see. Because it was actually my belief that the idea that Israel is like a rich country is quite a myth. I'm
actually seeing a lot. I've seen them ranked higher. The list I'm looking at is actually putting them 19th, not 14th.
Me too.
I did
higher than New Zealand, for example.
I did see a ranking where they were 14th. I think these things vary year to year, and they vary when you correct by PPP, purchasing power parity.
That's interesting though, because the UK is number 22, and Israel is
It
19. So it is higher. Okay.
it was higher in the UK, even on that list. And I saw a different one where it was number 14. So it's in the top 20, and I think that does give Israel a strong capacity to do things. I think, and what's more, I would say the international community, countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like the United Arab Emirates, countries like the UK, the US, they also, these are wealthy modern countries, also have a capacity to help out and to reduce the suffering and to.
I guess the argument is that they have been doing these things. Like Israel has. Would you not agree that Israel has made attempts over years, and from what I understand and from what I've seen, maybe I'm wrong, but Israel has been constantly sort of handing out olive branches over decades, and they're constantly sort of chopped quite violently. Maybe I'm biased.
I think that I think there has been ideological anti-Zionist rejection on the Palestinian side, because there was, people like to go back to 1948, but there were anti-Zionist riots in the 1920s and 1930s. There were, there is a history of Palestinian complete rejection of the idea of Zionism, right? So that there is some truth to that. But what I'm talking about is just capacity for action right now. The Palestinians are aid-dependent, economically very weak. Diplomatically, they do have some friends, particularly in the Muslim world. But I think I certainly think if we're going to have a pro-life attitude, if we're going to preach pro-life, pro-human values, we have to preach them on both sides. And I think I was reading Marcus Aurelius, right? Yes, you're right. So one of the things that he emphasizes is there are things in the world that we can't change, that we have no power over, and we have to accept those. And if you're Palestinian, right, Israel is not a thing that you control. What you control is yourself. The first thing you control is yourself and your own actions and your own thoughts. And that goes in the opposite direction if you're Israeli. You don't control what Palestinians think. You control yourself and your own actions and your thoughts. And I think when it comes to this issue, and when it comes to bridging this divide, because there's a huge divide here, and we need, in order to get to the pleasant, peaceful, humanistic vision that I have, people have to take actions. And we have to take actions first of all as individuals, and second as communities, and third as countries. And we have to accept there are certain things we can't change, but what we can change is our own actions and our own thoughts. And I think I argued yesterday with a group of vociferous Palestinians who were criticizing me incredibly strongly. I'm to some extent I'm a Palestinian outcast. I'm a very controversial figure, right? Because I'm seen as being far too critical of Palestinians. That's how I get framed. I'm seen as far too critical of Palestinians because I'm always saying, what can Palestinians do to make things better? And I'm taking inspiration from Marcus Aurelius there, because Palestinians do control their own actions and thoughts and their own immediate vicinity, right? The first step to fixing things is taking little actions yourself, even within your own thoughts, even within thinking the thought, I want to have peace and I want to peacefully coexist. And I think there are so many things Palestinians can do. And I think it's so destructive where you have a lot of people on the left, the far left, who strip Palestinians completely of agency, and they say Israel is the only one who can fix this. And they're right in a sense that Israel has a lot more power, which is what we were just discussing in terms of economic power, in terms of military power, probably in terms of diplomatic power because of the strong relationship with the United States. But Palestinians do still have some agency, and they can still take constructive steps towards working towards peace. And I would encourage people on both sides Step one could just be trying to empathize with the other side a little bit, right? It could be having a conversation with someone from the other side, and you might not agree with them. You might find they're a horrible person, in which case you probably need to leave the conversation, block and report, if they're threatening you or whatever. But I think
agree completely. And I'm a massive, Stoic, and I know that Stoic philosophy sort of melded with Christian thought, and this idea of the individual, that we're individuals with individual agency. That's the popular opinion in the West, and I love it. I think it's the best way to be, but I don't think that other cultures have such an emphasis on the individual or individual responsibility. And I also think that if you're into a really dogmatic religion, whether it's Judaism or Islam, not that I think they're very similar, actually. They're similar in some ways, but I think it's very hard to have that sort of stoic response if you have such a dogmatic religious belief.
Right. No, that's absolutely true. Right. I don't think, I don't know how much success I would have going to, Hamas and trying to preach stoicism to them. Right. But I still think that secularly, without reference to religion, even without reference I'm going to talk about Marcus Aurelius, without any of that, it is true. It is true that we control our own thoughts, and we control our own actions in our little individual environments. And if we're going to achieve the things that we want to achieve, it has to start with taking the right small steps towards the things we want.
This leads me into another question, which is, do you think that peace is achievable with Islam being there?
I think there part of the nature of the conflict, right, is that the Al-Aqsa Mosque is one of the holiest sites in Islam, right, and the land of Palestine has been defined as Dar al-Islam, which means Islamic land. And part of the vitriolic response to Israel has been the idea that this is Muslim land and Muslims need to be the rulers. Okay, Jewish people can be, dhimmis, and they can live, they can pay the jizya tax. And that is, that's been the model in the Islamic world for a long time. And there was a very large Jewish population throughout the Islamic world. And most of it now has gone to Israel since the mistreatment of Jewish people in the Islamic world in places like Algeria, Morocco, and Iran, and Yemen, since the foundation of Israel. And Arab anti-Zionism has been a motivating factor for maybe the mistreatment of those long-standing Jewish communities in the Islamic world, and so all of those people now are in Israel. So I think that practically it's going to be necessary to change the tactics and the strategy on the Arab Muslim Palestinian side, in terms of this is Dar al-Islam. If there's ever going to be a two-state solution where Zionism is coexisted with, right? That needs to be something that happens, and that can ultimately, it's going to happen in individual brains before it happens collectively. And I can certainly tell you, I know plenty of Muslim Palestinians who will agree with me as individuals that, okay, let's peacefully coexist with the Zionists.
Palestinians who live in Palestine?
Some of them. Many of them are in the diaspora, because of course Palestinians are. We've been diasporized in a way that, obviously Jewish people have also had this diaspora life as well. So it's a similarity Palestinians and Jewish people have. But yes, I do know some Palestinians in Palestine who will say yes. And if you look at polls, you will see it goes up and down. There have been times when it goes over 50%. And then there are times when it goes down to 10%. Right now, we're closer to 10%. But yes,
sorry, percent what?
For support for the two-state solution.
Okay.
Sorry, did I not make that clear? So sometimes the support, it goes up and down, right? There is support for peaceful coexistence and a two-state solution, and it goes up and then it goes down. But it has at various points support for a two-state solution has been over 50%. To what extent that support for a two-state solution is temporary in the way that Hamas's position has been various things, and at various points they have claimed, oh yes, we would like a two-state solution temporarily. So there is also an element of that, and then ultimately there will be a Islamic one-state solution. But this is an incredibly complicated and controversial topic to comment on, and I'm personally not religious, so in terms of commenting on other people's religious doctrine, but I certainly know some Muslims who are of this mind that yes, we can coexist with the Zionists, and I think that at some point that could rise to a critical mass where you do get a society that is willing to accept a peaceful, coexistent two-state solution. I mean, what is Dar al-Islam, right, has changed over the centuries. There have been, Muslims are not trying to reconquer Spain, right, at the moment.
I have seen a few videos on Memory TV that I've sent to Spanish friends being like, oh. Those
are idiots. They don't have. These are really extremists, and they're certainly not in Spain trying to reconquer it. Of course, the most extreme people want a global caliphate, don't they? Which is, and I think that. If you're of the mindset you want to conquer the whole world, whether that's for Islam, whether that's for Marxism, whether that's for the United States of America, I don't know, whatever it's for. If you're of the mindset you want to have a global empire of one ideology, it's very hard to coexist with anyone of that view, right? But
definitely.
I think,
the fact that I've heard that like some Somalian Muslims, for example, I think it was Sam Harris talking about Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and that she grew up with no Jews around, but had this concept that she should inherently hate Jews, the Yahuds, just because she was told that. So I really sort of, I think with this branch of Muslim fundamentalism, it's going to be really hard for Israel and Jews to live peacefully there. If it was a more sort of reform, like obviously in Judaism, there's like Orthodox, there's reform, and then it's the same with Christianity. Like I think some forms of Islam are probably more compatible to having peace, but fundamental.
A lot of countries have signed Abraham Accords with Israel. And I follow a Emirati kind of peace activist who's a Muslim, and he's constantly posting about how his Jewish friends love to go to the mosque with him in the UAE. So there are lots of different schools of Islam. Some of them are more amenable to this idea of modernity and coexistence. And I think in the modern world, probably that's what's going to win, because I don't think anyone wants to live like Gaza, right? In the end, people would much rather live like Dubai or like Bahrain or Qatar. They don't want to live like they lived. Hamas has led the Palestinian people to hell, and that's a sign. That's a sign that these extremist schools of thought are not going to work. And I mean, look what ISIS have brought upon the areas that they controlled. These extremist ideologies, they lead to destruction.
I think that is a really good point, actually. And, Steven Pinker talks about this in Enlightenment now, that with progress, when people have more money or more freedom or more disposable income and they're happier people, they don't want to hurt other people so much. They don't want suffering for their neighbor because they are living prosperously and they can focus on themselves and living a nice life. That's why, yeah,
It's,
you
it's
know, and you see
interesting
that
you
in
raise.
Australia. You see people who have come from war-torn countries or the children of war-torn countries. And look, I still think, as October 7th sort of showed us, and the protests at the Opera House with, Gas the Jews and things like that, I think there's still a lot of learnt racism and learnt anti-Semitism. But fortunately, so far, touch wood, it hasn't developed any further. But I think that's why in the West, we should be really mindful of unemployment and poverty and any other forms of instability, because once things get more and more unstable in Australia or in the UK, that's when that's when race-based tribal violence breaks out, because you know what I mean?
I think it's really interesting you raised Steven Pinker, because I think Steven Pinker's been a big intellectual influence on me over the years, and I would say that his discussion of the decline of violence throughout the ages it's very instructive. And one of the biggest places where that decline is apparent is in Europe. And Europe for many centuries was torn apart by inter-Christian warfare. Which sect of Christianity is the right one, and how do we impose it on others? So this, religious violence is not something that's unique to the Muslim world, right? It's not unique to any religion. Pretty much every religion has some level of violent history. I think Buddhism maybe has the reputation for being the most peaceful, but every religion has some level of reputation for having some level of violent history. And there's been a huge decline in Christian violence, and that is linked to, I would say, modernization, secularization, economic development, and secular nationalism and national infrastructure. And when your life is, I'm going to go to school, and I'm going to go to university, and I'm going to become a doctor, I'm going to become an engineer, I'm going to become a poet or an artist, and I'm going to peacefully coexist with people who have different religious views to me, then that's the path you go on. If you're being raised in a very poor country, and everyone around you is talking about how maybe they're talking about they hate the Jews, maybe they're talking about they hate Israel, and they're talking about jihad, martyrdom, then what's going to happen? You're going to get put on a pathway towards Hamas, Al-Qassam. So I think modernization has worked in Europe, and it came out of one of the most brutal conflicts and one of the most anti-Semitic conflicts. Of course, Godwin's law. We're now talking about Hitler. Hitler was a brutal dictator who murdered, slaughtered, not just 6 million Jews, but disabled people and gypsies and just all the different groups he hated. But after that, after we saw where that leads, we saw where it led. It led to the gates of hell. When Europeans saw where that led, there was liberalization and tolerance and secularism, and countries started to coexist. And nowadays, a guy who's born in France or a girl who's born in France can go and live in Germany, and they have freedom of movement between those countries, right? So the future could be very bright for the Middle East if they look at what happened with the EU and people, not just Israelis and Palestinians, because there's a lot more violence around the Middle East. There's Yemen and there's Syria and there's Afghanistan. If people look at the status quo and they see the violence that's going on and they say there is an alternative, economic development, modernity, prosperity, that's the alternative that we want to go towards, where we can coexist peacefully and where we can understand our neighbors. That would be wonderful if the Middle East chooses that path.
Yeah, I wonder about the generational differences. I know your dad was born there. I'm not sure around what year he was born, but from what I've seen I love this YouTube channel, Ask a Palestinian or Ask an Israeli. Have you seen that YouTube channel?
Yes, I certainly have, many times, for many different
Yeah,
questions.
like there are lots of vox pops. For people who haven't seen it, this guy goes around doing vox pops on the street, asking Palestinians, asking Israelis what they think about each other and the war and everything. And some people have commented, and maybe I've seen it too, that at times there does seem to be a generational difference between older Palestinians and younger. Obviously, we all know that young men are like the most, violent throughout all cultures. It's, a normal thing for young men to feel this aggressive, testosterone, go to war, and also feel like young men need a purpose. And I think as we were saying before, when young men can't get work or an education or money or a family or women, they feel the need to get it violently. So I think that's part of what's happening there. But to go back to my original question, do you think there is a generational difference? Obviously, there are young people like you who are more pro-peace with the internet and, talking. Surely this should help.
Do I think Palestinians are modernizing? I certainly do. I think it's vastly different and easier if you live in the West. Obviously, I went through the British school system. A lot of my critics say that I'm not really Palestinian because although my father's Palestinian, I'm culturally British. Some people would see me as that. I don't agree with them. I think being Palestinian is passed down from father to son. That's what is. That's the way I would interpret it. That's also the way the law in Palestine interprets it. The PLO Charter says that being Palestinian is defined by having a Palestinian father. So, yes.
It's the opposite to Judaism.
It's patrilineal,
which is maternal. Yeah.
Patrilineal. Yeah. So of course, if you have a Jewish mother and a Palestinian father, then you're going to be you'll be both, right? But yeah. I think modern young Palestinians, of course, are going to have a modern young mentality because they're going to play video games, they're going to read Twitter, they're going to listen to pop music, especially if you live in the West. You're going to, and it's also possible that you can go through a normal childhood in the West and then you can become completely radicalized. That happens to white European kids sometimes. Sometimes you get
all the time.
And he ends up in a training camp in Afghanistan, firing a RPG on his shoulder. So it can. We're all individuals and we can all go in different directions, but I absolutely do see a trend and a current towards modernization. And as I say, sometimes that will be in people who are like Emirati, for example, like or Saudi. They have grown up in a more sort of modern environment. Yes, it's still a deeply religiously Muslim environment, but they see the benefits of modernity. They might have traveled to the US, they might have traveled to the UK, and you get as you travel to more modern and economically developed countries, and it could be South Korea, it could be somewhere in the East, right? It could be Singapore, it could be Qatar, very controversial, but it could be Qatar, and you as you travel more and as you learn more and as you meet more people, it expands your horizons. And I think generally that's what's happening. The Palestinians who I meet, who I talk to, who have left Gaza and who are criticizing Hamas, are people with wider horizons than just I'm going to sit in a room all day and I'm going to read the Quran and I'm going to study exactly how to grow my beard in the exact same way as the Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah. So I think two things with the advent of social media, I've noticed two things. Like there's the path that you've gone on, which is the path of, enlightenment and tolerance. And like learning more and curiosity. But I think there's also this other path which really worries me, which is that young people see, maybe naively because they haven't experienced it firsthand, but they see like the revolutionary aspect, like the leftist sort of like these groups, Hamas, the Houthis, Even the Taliban, I know a lot of young people see them as really cool and really, because they stand up against the fuddy-duddy, like conservative parents. Like I even notice that in what I've been posting. I think a lot of my friends who see themselves, friends, by the way, who know nothing about the conflict and haven't met a single Palestinian or Israeli nor Jew nor anyone, but they just see like the PR for Palestine is so much better than for Israel, and they see Israel is not only like evil Zionist, but like lame and old school and like conservative, and Palestine is cool and revolutionary and like diverse, and
I've there's some pretty cringe social media on both sides. I've seen some pretty cringe pro-Israel stuff, right? I think in terms of what people see on social media, and what sort of information they're consuming. I think that there are people with like a fuddy-duddy conservative, maybe the term boomerish mentality on all sides. I think Israel is certainly struggling in terms of its standing in the world, and I think one very, very large factor with that is, of course, going to be the very asymmetric death counts, and we're continuously seeing Palestinian children dead in Gaza. So I think Israel is very easy to hate. Certainly something that's true in British culture. I don't know the extent it's true in Australian culture. Is we love a plucky upstart, right? So
the underdog.
The Palestinians are very, very much the underdog, and I think there are lots of social media operators who support the Palestinian cause very devoutly, and people who support Hamas, who are very, very good at social media and very good at getting clicks and likes, and they use their words and they use their emojis and they use videos and photos very, very cleverly. But I think the deeper point here is that there is an ideology of decolonization, Marxism, Leninism, Tankyism that is sort of floating around in the background. It is the idea West bad, the West is bad, modernity is bad, return to primitive, decolonized, indigenous wonderfulness where we live at harmony with nature, and I think the ideas of that movement are so nebulous because there isn't really a country that has ever pulled that off, really, right? Even countries that have done decolonization of a colonial power, like for example Nigeria, they're still trying to modernize their economy. They're still trying to have a modern economy and modern technology. So I think a lot of it is really, really naive wishful thinking on the part of maybe some people who are quite young, who absorb this idea that the West is bad and modernity is bad and liberalism is bad, and what we really need are communist decolonizers who are going to slaughter all of the bad guys, because they view the world in incredibly Manichean terms of one side is very, very, very good and they're the oppressed peoples of the world, and one side is very, very bad and that's the oppressors. And of course, when you apply that label to this conflict, the oppressed people are the Palestinians. Zionism took their land, and the oppressors are, of course, the Israelis, and hand in hand with the Americans and Genocide Joe, or whatever they're going to call him. And I think that this is an extremely simplistic reading of what's going on, because the actual history, when you really look at it, is that Jewish people as a diaspora were maybe one of the most oppressed groups ever. We mentioned Hitler earlier, but actually there was a 1,000 years of pogroms, 1,000 years of riots and massacres of Jewish people based upon anti-Semitic myths like, oh, they're poisoning the wells, they drink the blood of children, They're responsible for spreading the plague. And these things have got repeated and repeated and repeated. And of course, there have been pogroms and expulsions. There were expulsions in the UK. There probably were, I don't think there were any from Australia, because Australia was not established then as a modern nation state. But there were certainly expulsions.
Spain, Italy, everywhere.
In Italy, right.
Yeah, pretty much everywhere where Jews have lived.
And the reality is that in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's two separate national movements that are both seeking the liberation of living in a self-determining country. And I think fundamentally that's the truth, that it's not actually that the Israelis are colonizers at all. It's that they're a different country to the Palestinians. There's two countries here, and of course the Palestinian desire to live, safely and securely in a Palestinian state is legitimate. If that's the desire, of course, with Hamas, it's actually this globalist Islamist vision of, first we conquer Palestine and then we start looking to unite with the rest of the Muslim world and we extinguish Zionism. That's the Hamas perspective, but. In terms of the Palestinian cause, I think that the Palestinian cause is we want to be a Palestinian country with a Palestinian flag, and we want it to be internally contiguous, and we want to be economically normalized. I think that's completely respectable, and it's something that I support and promote 100%. I am a supporter of the legitimate Palestinian cause of being a Palestinian country and having self-determination, but the reality is that this is shades of grey. It's not actually an oppressor 100% and an oppressed 100%. And it's hard for people to conceptualize that. And people will get very, very angry. They get very angry because sometimes it isn't as simple as, oh, there's a colonial power and the colonial power is bad and the colonial power needs to withdraw. Reality is complicated. The world's complicated. And so and sometimes you have to compromise, and sometimes you have to work within the boundaries of reality.
Yeah, and my view towards Israel, I was actually quite anti-Israel as a young person at university. I knew nothing about it, but I knew that Israel bad, Palestine good, Israel evil, oppressors, Palestinians oppressed. And I had, no understanding. And then, post October 7th and speaking to more Jews and Israelis, I've learned about how Israel came to be and the reasons for Zionism, and also what other country in the world needs an Iron Dome. There's a reason why Israel needed to protect itself so much. And also, as we both know, Jews have just suffered from persecutions from day dot, and maybe they can be seen as overly, paranoid or zealous, but people who have, survived the Holocaust, or, the children or grandchildren of these people, they know what it's like, and they know that things can turn on a dime. Jews in Germany they were one of the most prosperous Jewish groups in the world, and things were all good, and then things just started, at first quite slowly, you know, little things started happening, and then like before you know it, there's a full-on like death camps and the Holocaust, and these things do happen. And I think we're too comfortable in the modern world. We think that it couldn't happen again, but these things do happen.
I think a lot of Jewish people who I talk to in the UK, who I'm friends with, are extremely concerned about the status of Jewish people in this country. And a lot of it is related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, where there are groups of young people who think that if you're a Zionist, you're an evil oppressor. And that is this new spiral of anti-Semitism, which could turn into violent pogroms against Jewish people. That is, we hope not, we pray not, we discourage it, we want people to peacefully coexist, of course. But there, you know, when you have this setup of there is this group and they are the oppressor, that is the mentality that it can breed. Is that sometimes people are labeled as the oppressor for the purpose of subjugating them, and that, you know, that's what we saw in the Rwandan genocide, for example, right? So labeling someone as an oppressor is quite a dangerous. It's quite a dangerous thing if you then turn it into we need to hurt that group of people. So I certainly know the Jewish community is incredibly well established in the UK, right? They've been here for hundreds of years. I believe it was Oliver Cromwell re-invited Jewish people to settle in the UK after they were, I believe that the last expulsion was 1291. But the Jews in the UK have been here for hundreds of years, but I know Jewish people who keep suitcases packed literally because they are concerned that there could be a spiral of pogroms, and that is terrible for me that I have to contemplate that, because I want to work towards a world of peace and tolerance and understanding where we can all coexist and where our differences can be expressed verbally and resolved verbally through a process of negotiation and through a process of, I scratch my back, I scratch your back, you scratch my back.
Okay.
That's not the way it's going for some communities that are being labeled as oppressors.
Mm-hmm. Okay, a few more questions. I feel like we could talk about this for hours. I actually have like 100 more questions, but I'm going to try to get to the most important one. So you, in your Atlantic piece, you say you grew up like watching and reading Al Jazeera, things like this, like which obviously has like Al Jazeera does have a bias against Israel and Zionism.
Institutional bias,
Was there a turning point? Like, did you almost go down the route of like that? Who did we see yesterday? Mohammed El Kurd, who was like on the street, like, in the UK, sort of.
Oh, me personally, yeah. I've been to lots of pro-Palestine rallies. I've done all well, not all. I mean, there are some really really awful ones. I've definitely done From the River to the Sea, Palestine will be free. I mean, did I understand that meant the destruction of Israel? No, I didn't think about it like that at the time. I was doing the maybe more westernized interpretation of, that means there should be a free Palestinian state. So
when did you change, and what changed you?
I went through a long process of contemplation, and a lot of that is going to be reading philosophy. I think reading Nelson Mandela's autobiography was pretty important. Reading Marcus Aurelius, reading funnily enough, learning statistics and learning about people like Nazim Nicholas Taleb. He was a pretty big influence on me. He's actually very very pro-Palestine now, which is
I've seen, yeah.
But he certainly got me into stoicism and thinking about.
Can I just explain? Sorry, because my face probably looked really sad when you said he's pro-Palestine. I'm not. I think we should say it's not that he's pro-Palestine. None of us. I do not have an issue with people being pro-Palestine. I have an issue with people being anti-Israel. Exactly. So the issue is with being anti-Zionist. So how did you come to be?
Maybe I should have said he was actually. It was not so much that he's being pro-Palestine. It was that he's being quite anti-Zionist, quite delegitimizing of the Israeli cause. But I think reading a lot is very important to me. Cultivating friendships with Jewish people so that I could try and see things from both sides. I think I've been very fortunate in that I've kind of grown up with access to Jewish people. It's probably a little bit harder if you live in Palestine or Sudan or Ethiopia or countries with 0% Jewish populations, have access to Jewish people, so you can try and see things from the Israeli side a little bit.
Did you have preconceptions about Jewish people?
I personally, within my family and with my mother, I was always taught to be, kind of judge people as an individual and not have any sort of preconceptions about groups and communities. To be honest, my father as well was he was a physicist, so he grew up meeting Jewish people a lot, right, in Western universities and in companies he was working for. So he had many Jewish colleagues. So he was, he never, although he was a very strong Palestinian nationalist and a river to the sea Palestinian nationalist, by the way.
He was anti-Zionist.
Oh, I would describe his view as anti-Zionist. He certainly was not. He certainly was not. He certainly was not anti-Jewish. He always taught me to be respectful to Jewish people, and I think his vision of river to the sea is there's a Palestinian state and Jewish people can stay and Jewish people will be fine. And of course, is that a naive interpretation? Well, in my opinion, it is. I think that what happened in Hebron in the 1920s and 1930s and Zafed as well. I think that there were anti-Jewish pogroms before a Zionist state was even established. So I think it is naive because there are elements of large scale anti-Semitism in some of these radical ideologies. So I would be very worried. But I think my father certainly was. He was a supporter of river to the sea Palestine, and at the same time he was someone who taught me to be very respectful and very tolerant of Jewish people. So life's complicated.
So in summary, reading philosophy and speaking to other people and educating yourself sort of changed your mind, and hopefully do the same for other people.
Changed my mind is a bit of a, I don't think I ever really had and fully anti-Zionist views. I think I always was sort of aware that there was going to be, because I grew up with Oslo. So I was aware that there was a two-state solution, and I was aware that there was an Israeli side. And of course, nobody ever to me, it was never forced on me that I should believe the Israeli side should be destroyed. So I was a child of Oslo. I was a child of the 90s, and I think I've always kind of been pro two-state solution. But many people of my generation have gone like Muhammad al-Kurd have gone completely towards the river to the sea mentality. So I could have easily gone in a different direction if I was a different person.
And what do you, to finish on this note, what do you have to say to, I guess, young people who feel like, they're at a crossroads, choosing sort of your route of peace or Muhammad al-Kurd's river to the sea, get rid of Israel, or, a more violent approach, I would say?
I think maybe the most important thing is look at the consequences of river to the sea now in Gaza, right? That's Hamas's ideology. That is where, you like to strip Palestinians. I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to people in general. You like to strip Palestinians of agency and say everything is on Israel. But Hamas does have agency. Hamas could choose a different path, right? They've chosen the path of rockets and tunnels and resistance, war, permanent war to permanently dislodge Israel. They've chosen that. That's their ideology. And look at the consequences. Look at the consequences for people under the rule of ISIS. Look at the consequences for people who lived in Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany was an expansionistic state. Look at the consequences. Whenever there is military intolerant expansionism, it leads to mass violence, and and sometimes that mass violence rebounds back on you, because you're not always going to be the conqueror. Sometimes you try and conquer someone and they push back and you lose. So I think modernity and freedom and peace and humanity are the values that people should choose. I think that's what I believe in. I think that is what I want to encourage people from my Palestinian background to support. I don't speak for anyone but myself, but I think that is what is going to be successful for Palestinians and for the world.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much for joining me, and hope to see you again soon, because we could talk about this for hours, but I think an hour is enough for today.